Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Calder Matthews stared at his plate, the salmon he'd grilled earlier now cold and untouched. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that had fallen over the dining room. He looked up at Marla, his wife of 17 years, who sat across from him, swirling her wine with unexpected calmness. "I've been sleeping with Jules for 6 months now," she said, her voice flat and unapologetic. "I needed a real man." The words hung in the air between them. Calder's fork remained suspended halfway to his mouth. He set it down without a sound. "A real man," he repeated, his voice betraying nothing of the storm building inside him. Marla nodded, a smug expression crossing her face. "You never hear, Calder. Always at work. Always in your head." I got tired of waiting. Calder looked at her. The woman he had built a life with now seemed like a stranger. Her blonde hair fell around her shoulders, recently styled at that expensive salon she frequented with his money. The diamond necklace he'd given her for their 15th anniversary glinted at her throat. "Jules understands me," she continued, almost daring him to react. "He listens. He's passionate. Dad, she's right." Brennan's voice cut through the tension. Calder turned to face his 19-year-old son, who had been silent until now. "You're always locked in your office or at work. Mom's been lonely." The betrayal sliced deeper. His own son, taking her side without hesitation. "How long has he known?" Calder asked, his gaze returning to Marla. "A month." She shrugged. "I didn't see the point in hiding it from him. He's an adult." Calder nodded slowly, taking in the information. His fingers tingled with numbness as he pushed his chair back from the table. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor. "Dad, aren't you going to say anything?" Brennan demanded, his voice rising. "Mom's trying to be honest with you." Calder walked to the key hook by the door, his movements measured and deliberate. He grabbed his car keys, the metal cool against his palm. "Where are you going?" Marla called, her composure slipping for the first time. This wasn't the reaction she had expected. "Calder, we need to talk about this." But Calder didn't turn around. He opened the front door and stepped out into the cool evening air. Behind him, he heard Brennan's voice. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about." He just shuts down. The door closed with a soft click. In his car, Calder sat motionless, staring at the house he'd worked so hard to provide. Through the dining room window, he could see Marla and Brennan, their mouths moving in animated discussion. About him, no doubt. Plotting their next move, he started the engine and pulled away from the curb. He had no destination in mind, but his hands seemed to know where to go, steering him toward the highway that would take him out of Millbridge. As the miles stretched between him and the broken family he left behind, Calder's mind remained strangely clear. There was no rage, no desperate sadness, only a cold, growing resolve. They had made their choice. Now he would make his. The gravel crunched under the tires as Calder pulled up to the cabin. Pine Hollow looked exactly as he remembered. A small, weathered structure nestled among towering trees, isolated from the nearest neighbor by a quarter-mile of dense forest. His father had built this place with his own hands, a sanctuary from the world. Now it would serve the same purpose for him. Calder stepped out of the car, stretching his stiff limbs after the 3-hour drive. The mountain air filled his lungs, crisp and clean. He hadn't been here in over 2 years. Marla had always complained about the lack of amenities, and eventually he'd stopped suggesting weekend trips. The key stuck in the lock, rusty from disuse. With a firm twist, the door swung open with a groan. Dust motes danced in the beam of his flashlight as he made his way inside. The electricity would need to be turned on, but there was enough moonlight spilling through the windows to navigate by. He set his phone on the kitchen counter and watched as messages from Marla piled up. 23 texts and 7 missed calls, their frequency increasing as the night wore on. With deliberate calm, he turned the phone off and slid it into a drawer. Sleep came surprisingly easily on the old sofa, wrapped in a musty blanket he found in the hall closet. When morning broke through the windows, Calder rose with purpose. First, he called his assistant. "Ryan, I'm taking 2 weeks off. Forward any urgent matters to my email but tell everyone else I'm unavailable. Sir, is everything all right? Ryan's concern was evident. Everything's fine. I just need some time to handle personal matters. Next, he called his lawyer, Michael Donovan. I need to meet with you as soon as possible. My wife has been having an affair, and I expect she'll be filing for divorce. I'm sorry to hear that, Calder. How about tomorrow, 10 a.m.? I'll be there. The third call was to the caretaker who looked after the cabin during the winter months. Jim, I need the electricity turned on and some supplies delivered. I'll be staying for a while. With the essentials arranged, Calder spent the day clearing away cobwebs and dust, airing out the small cabin that would be his home for the foreseeable future. There was something therapeutic about the physical labor, about making order from chaos. By late afternoon, he sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee, watching the shadows lengthen across the clearing. His phone remained off. Whatever was happening back in Millbridge would keep until he was ready to face it. The next morning, he drove into Pine Hollow proper, a small town with one main street and a handful of businesses. At the hardware store, he purchased tools and materials to repair the cabin's sagging back steps and leaking roof. Haven't seen you around in a while, said the owner, Frank, as he rang up the purchases. Been busy, Calder replied simply. Staying long? Not sure yet. Frank nodded, not pushing for more. That was the beauty of small towns like Pine Hollow. People minded their own business. Over the next week, Calder fell into a routine. He woke at dawn, worked on the cabin until noon, drove into town for lunch at the local diner, then returned for more repairs until sunset. In the evenings, he sat by the fireplace, drafting plans not for the cabin, but for his life. That on the seventh day, he finally turned his phone back on. A flood of notifications lit up the screen, more messages from Marla, now alternating between pleas and threats, several from Brennan demanding he come home, and a host of concerned inquiries from friends and colleagues. Point one message stood out. Calder, it's Michael. I've been doing some digging. Call me when you can. Calder did, stepping outside to pace the wooden porch as he spoke with his lawyer. I found some interesting financial irregularities, Michael said without preamble. Large withdrawals from your joint account over the past 8 months. Does that time frame mean anything to you? Calder's jaw tightened. That's around when Marla's affair started, according to her. I thought as much. We're talking about significant sums, Calder. Almost $200,000. The number hung in the air. Calder stared into the forest, watching a deer pick its way through the underbrush, oblivious to his presence. What's your advice, Michael? Document everything. I've already started building a case. When you come back to town, we'll need to meet in person to go over the strategy. I'll be back in a few days. After hanging up, Calder remained on the porch, thinking. The betrayal went deeper than he'd initially believed. This wasn't just emotional infidelity. Marla had been systematically draining their accounts, likely setting herself up for a life with Jules. That night, he made a decision. He wouldn't rage. He wouldn't plead. He would be cold, calculating, and patient. Marla had chosen her path, and now he would ensure she walked it alone, with all the consequences that entailed. 2 days later, Calder packed up his few belongings, closed the cabin, and headed back to Millbridge. Not to reconcile, not to argue, but to win. The law office of Donovan and Associates occupied the top floor of one of Millbridge's few high-rise buildings. Calder sat across from Michael, reviewing the documents spread between them. She's demanding half of everything, including your business, Michael said, tapping a legal document with his pen. An alimony that would make most judges raise an eyebrow. Calder nodded, unsurprised. And Brennan, he's 19, so custody isn't an issue, but she's trying to get you to continue paying his college expenses while she controls the trust fund you set up for him. Of course she is. Calder leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. What's our counter? Michael slid another document across the desk. I've prepared this. Given the financial evidence we've uncovered and the admission of infidelity, we're in a strong position. Calder skimmed the document, noting the aggressive but fair terms. This is good. What's next? We file our response and wait for her attorney to contact us. In the meantime, you'll need to move back into the house. Calder's eyebrows rose. The house. Yes. If you abandon the marital home, it could be used against you. I suggest moving into one of the guest rooms and maintaining a civil presence. The idea of sharing space with Marla after her betrayal was distasteful, but Calder understood the strategy. Fine, I'll move back tonight. As predicted, Marla was not at home when he arrived. The house felt different, somehow colder, despite the warm spring afternoon. Calder carried his suitcase upstairs to the guest bedroom farthest from the master suite and unpacked methodically. He was in the kitchen preparing a simple dinner when he heard her key in the lock. Brennan's voice drifted in from the entryway, followed by Marla's laugh, a sound that once brought him joy but now rang hollow. They both froze when they saw him at the counter, knife in hand, calmly slicing a tomato. "What are you doing here?" Marla demanded, her carefully applied makeup not quite hiding the tension around her eyes. "I live here," Calder replied simply, not looking up from his task. "You walked out on us," Brennan said, his stance confrontational. "You don't get to just come back like nothing happened." Calder set down the knife and turned to face them fully. "I didn't walk out on us, Brennan. There was no us. The moment your mother decided to sleep with another man, and you chose to support her." Marla's face flushed with anger. "You have no right to speak to him like that." "I have every right. He's my son, and he's old enough to understand the consequences of taking sides in adult matters." "I took Mom's side because she's right about you," Brennan shot back. "You're cold. You always have been." Calder nodded, as if considering this assessment. "Perhaps, but I've never been dishonest, and I've never taken what wasn't mine." He directed his gaze to Marla. $200,000, to be exact. The color drained from Marla's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do, and so does my lawyer." Calder returned to preparing his meal. "I'll be staying in the East guest room until the divorce is finalized. I suggest we keep our interactions to a minimum. You can't dictate terms to me in my own house," Marla sputtered, her composure slipping. "Our house," Calder corrected, "paid for with my earnings while you redecorated every 2 years with money we apparently didn't have to spare." "Mom, let's go," Brennan urged, tugging at her arm. "We don't need to listen to this." Marla glared at Calder, who continued preparing his dinner as if they weren't there. "This isn't over," she hissed. "No," Calder agreed, finally looking up at her with cold eyes. "It's just beginning." The next week passed in a frigid standoff. Calder left early each morning for work and returned late, avoiding Marla as much as possible. When they did cross paths, their exchanges were clipped and loaded with tension. Brennan had returned to his dorm at the State University, but made his allegiance clear with daily calls to Marla and silence toward his father that on Friday evening. Calder was reviewing contracts in his home office when a knock came at the door. Without waiting for a response, Marla entered, a glass of wine in hand. "We need to talk," she said, attempting to sound reasonable. Calder set down his pen. "I believe our lawyers are handling communication." "Don't be ridiculous, Calder. We were married for 17 years. We can settle this between ourselves without dragging it through the courts. Like you settled things with Jules without discussing it with me first." Marla's expression hardened. "That's not fair." "Fair." Calder leaned back in his chair. "You cheated on me, stole from our accounts, and turned our son against me. What part of that seems fair to you? I made a mistake, all right. Is that what you want to hear?" She took a step closer, her voice softening. "But we can work through this. For Brennan's sake, if nothing else." Calder studied her, seeing for the first time how manipulative she truly was. "You're not concerned about Brennan. You're concerned about losing your lifestyle." "That's not true." "It is. Your lawyer's demands make that perfectly clear." Calder stood, gathering his documents. "I'm not interested in working anything out, Marla. The time for that has passed." "So that's it? 17 years, and you're just walking away?" "I didn't walk away," Calder said quietly. "You did, the moment you decided to share another man's bed." Marla's face contorted with rage. "You're going to regret this, Calder. I'll take everything, your money, your business, your reputation. By the time I'm done, you'll wish you'd been more reasonable." A small, cold smile touched Calder's lips. "You're welcome to try." 3 days later, Calder sat in Michael's office again, reviewing Marla's latest legal maneuvers. "She's claiming emotional abandonment," Michael explained. Says you were physically present but emotionally absent. She's using that to justify both the affair and the financial withdrawals. Can she make that stick? Michael shook his head. It's a weak argument, especially given the evidence we have. But she's also trying to claim partial ownership of Matthew's construction on the basis that she helped you network and build client relationships. Calder's eyes narrowed. She attended 3 company functions a year and complained about each one. I know, but her attorney is good. Johnson specializes in high-conflict divorces and isn't above using underhanded tactics. Michael pushed a folder toward Calder. I've prepared our response. We're countering with evidence of her affair, the financial misappropriation, and statements from mutual friends who can attest to your involvement in the marriage. Calder flipped through the documents, nodding with satisfaction. This looks comprehensive. It is. I've also included a proposal for a settlement that's fair but not overly generous. If she's smart, she'll take it. And if she's not, Michael's expression was grim. Then we proceed to discovery, and all of this becomes public record. Calder considered this, weighing the potential impact on his business and reputation against the satisfaction of seeing Marla exposed for her actions. Proceed as planned, he said finally. I won't be bullied into giving her more than she deserves. As he left the office building, Calder spotted a familiar figure waiting by his car. Brennan stood with his hands shoved in his pockets, his expression a mixture of anger and uncertainty. Dad, he said as Calder approached. We need to talk. About what? Calder unlocked his car, but didn't get in, giving his son his full attention. About how you're treating Mom. She's really upset, and your lawyer is making all these accusations. They're not accusations if they're true, Brennan. But dragging all this into court, making it public? Do you know what that will do to her? Calder studied his son, seeing Marla's manipulation at work. Did she send you here? No. I came because I'm worried about both of you. That's not true, and we both know it. You're here because she asked you to plead her case. Calder's voice was even, controlled. Tell me, did she also tell you about the $200,000 she took from our accounts to set up her new life with Jules? Brennan's expression faltered. She said she needed security because you were planning to leave her. A bitter laugh escaped Calder. I had no plans to leave until I found out she'd been sleeping with another man for 6 months. She's lying to you, Brennan, and you're letting her because it's easier than facing the truth. The truth is that you were never there for her, or for me. Brennan's voice rose, drawing glances from passers-by. You were always working, always at the office. I was building a future for our family, Calder replied calmly. A future your mother has now decided to cash in on. You don't even care, do you, about any of this? Calder's expression remained impassive. I care very much. That's why I won't allow myself to be manipulated by your mother or by you. With that, he got into his car, leaving Brennan standing on the sidewalk. As he drove away, he caught a glimpse of his son in the rearview mirror, looking lost and angry. Part of him ached to go back, to try to explain, to salvage something of their relationship. But Calder had made his decision. He wouldn't bend, wouldn't break. Marla had made her choice, and Brennan had made his. Now, they would all have to live with the consequences. The Millbridge Gazette was never known for subtlety, but the front-page headline took even Calder by surprise. Local realtor in multiple affairs, prominent wives devastated. Beneath it, a candid photo of Jules Harmon showed the man walking out of an upscale restaurant, his arm around a woman who was definitely not Marla. Calder scanned the article as he sipped his morning coffee. According to the report, Jules had been juggling affairs with at least 4 women in town, including the wife of Councilman Porter. Anonymous sources claimed he targeted wealthy, unsatisfied wives, using his charm to secure financial investments in fictional real estate ventures. The phone rang, disrupting his reading. It was Michael. Have you seen the paper? His lawyer asked without preamble. I'm looking at it now. Interesting timing. Indeed. The councilman's wife filed a police report alleging fraud. Apparently, Harmon convinced her to invest $300,000 in a development that doesn't exist. Calder set down his coffee. Criminal charges? Likely. The DEA is investigating, and word is that several other women are coming forward. And Marla? Michael's voice held a hint of satisfaction. No comment from her in the article, but my sources tell me she's absolutely blindsided. She had no idea he was seeing other women, let alone defrauding them. After hanging up, Calder folded the newspaper carefully and placed it on the kitchen counter where Marla would be sure to see it. Then he left for work, a sense of grim vindication settling over him by mid-morning. His phone was buzzing incessantly with texts from friends and business associates, all expressing varying degrees of sympathy and curiosity. Calder ignored most, responding only to a few close friends with brief, non-committal replies. Ryan knocked on his office door around noon. "Sir, Mrs. Matthews is in the lobby. She's demanding to see you." Calder glanced at his watch. "Send her up." When Marla stormed into his office minutes later, it was clear she'd been crying. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the redness around her eyes or the blotchy flush on her cheeks. "Did you know?" she demanded without preamble, slamming the newspaper down on his desk. "Did you know about the others?" Calder regarded her calmly. "No, but I'm not surprised. What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that men who cheat with married women aren't typically known for their moral fortitude." Marla collapsed into a chair, her anger deflating into despair. "He said I was special, that what we had was real. I imagine he said that to all of them." Calder's voice held no sympathy, including Councilman Porter's wife, who's now pressing charges for fraud. Her head snapped up. "What? Your boyfriend wasn't just collecting hearts, Marla. He was collecting investment capital for developments that don't exist." Calder leaned forward, eyes cold. "Tell me, how much of our money did you give him?" The color drained from her face. "I didn't. The $200,000 you took from our accounts. Did it go to Jules's non-existent real estate ventures?" "It wasn't like that," she whispered, but her eyes told a different story. "Of course it was. You were just another Mark, Marla. Another wealthy, bored wife he could charm and exploit. You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Her voice sharpened. "Seeing me humiliated. I don't take pleasure in your humiliation," Calder replied honestly. "But I won't pretend to be sorry that the truth is coming out. Everyone's talking about it. The looks I got at the grocery store this morning." She shook her head, fighting back tears. "My friends won't return my calls. They're not really your friends if they abandon you at the first sign of trouble. Like you did." She shot back to Calder's expression hardened. "I didn't abandon you, Marla. You betrayed me. There's a difference." "I made a mistake, Calder." Her voice softened, taking on a pleading quality. "A terrible mistake. But we can get past this. We could go to counseling, start over." "No." The word was final, unyielding. "There's no starting over. Not after this. Because you're so perfect." Anger flared in her eyes again. "Because you never made a mistake? I'm far from perfect. But betrayal isn't a mistake, Marla. It's a choice. One you made repeatedly for months." Calder stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." "Calder, please. Don't do this. Think about Brennan, about our family. You should have thought about Brennan and our family before you started sleeping with Jules." Calder's voice was flat, emotionless. "Actions have consequences, Marla. It's time you faced yours." She stared at him for a long moment, her expression shifting from pleading to cold recognition. "You really don't care anymore, do you?" "I care about protecting what's mine. Beyond that." He shrugged. "No, I suppose I don't." As the door closed behind her, Calder returned to his desk, forcing himself to focus on the contracts awaiting his review. He wouldn't allow himself to dwell on the broken look in Marla's eyes or the twinge of something not regret, but perhaps recognition of what once was that he felt at her departure. That evening, as Calder walked into the house, he found Marla on the phone in the kitchen, her voice low and urgent. "Jules, please call me back. We need to talk about this. About us." A pause. "I know what the papers are saying, but I want to hear your side. Please." She froze when she saw Calder, quickly ending the call. They regarded each other in silence for a moment. "He won't call back," Calder said finally, setting his briefcase on the counter. "He's probably halfway to another state by now. You don't know that. I know his type." Calder moved to the refrigerator, pulling out ingredients for a simple dinner. "He's a con man, Marla. He takes what he wants and moves on." "He loved me," she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "Did he?" Or did he love what you could give him? She had no answer for that. Over the next week, the scandal grew. More women came forward, the total of missing investments climbing to nearly $1 million. Jules Harmon had indeed disappeared, his real estate office emptied overnight, his cell phone disconnected. Marla became a virtual recluse, avoiding public places where whispers and stares followed her. The women's charity board she had chaired asked her to step down until the situation resolved itself. Her weekly tennis group suddenly found their schedule too full to include her. Calder watched her isolation grow with detached interest. He had expected to feel satisfaction, even triumph, at her downfall. Instead, he felt nothing at all, a numbness that was, in its way, a relief. The woman who sat across the dinner table, pushing food around her plate in silence, was a stranger to him now. One evening, as he worked in his home office, he heard the doorbell ring, followed by hushed voices. Curious, he stepped into the hallway to see Marla ushering a tearful brunette into the living room. Diane Porter, the councilman's wife. Calder, Marla said stiffly when she noticed him. Diane and I are going to talk privately. He nodded, returning to his office but leaving the door ajar. Their voices drifted down the hall, first tentative, then growing in intensity as they shared their experiences with Jules. He said I was the only one, Diane sobbed. That what we had was special. He told me the same thing, Marla replied, her voice hollow. Word for word. Robert wants a divorce. Says he can't forgive the humiliation, let alone the money. Called her too, though I think the money bothers him more than the affair. There was a pause, then Diane spoke again, her voice lower. Is that true? What they're saying about Jules taking money from all of us? Yes, Marla admitted. I gave him $200,000 from our accounts for a development in Pine Hollow that doesn't exist. Oh, Marla. Another pause, then Marla asked, have you heard from him? Since the story broke. No. You? Nothing. I called, texted. He's just gone. As the women continued their commiseration, Calder returned to his work, their voices fading into background noise. Their shared betrayal had created an unlikely bond, but it changed nothing for him. Marla had made her choices. Now she would live with them, just as he was living with his. The next morning, a new headline dominated the Gazette. Harmon spotted in Vegas, fraud investigation expands. The article detailed how Jules had been seen at high-stakes poker tables, apparently spending his ill-gotten gains freely. Calder left the paper on the kitchen table and headed to work, wondering if this new development would be the final blow to whatever illusions Marla still harbored about her lover that IT was. When he returned home that evening, he found her at the dining room table, surrounded by papers, a determined set to her jaw. I've been talking with the other women, she said without looking up as he entered. We're filing a joint complaint against Jules. Criminal and civil. Calder raised an eyebrow. Good. I know it won't get our money back, but it's something. She finally met his gaze. I want to make this right, Calder. As much as I can. It's too late for that, Marla. She nodded slowly. I know, but I have to try anyway. For the first time since her confession, Calder felt a flicker of respect for her. Not forgiveness, never that, but acknowledgement of her attempt to take responsibility. IT changed nothing between them. The divorce proceedings continued. Their interactions remained cold and minimal. But in the days that followed, as Marla worked with the other women to build their case against Jules, Calder observed a shift in her steelier resolve, replacing the desperate denial she had clung to. She was facing her consequences. It was all he had wanted from the beginning. The campus courtyard buzzed with students enjoying the spring afternoon, but Calder barely noticed as he made his way toward the science building. Brennan had finally agreed to meet after weeks of ignored calls and terse text messages. He found his son sitting on a bench, backpack at his feet, looking younger and more vulnerable than Calder had seen him in years. Thanks for meeting me, Calder said, taking a seat beside him. Brennan nodded stiffly. Mom said I should hear you out. The words were like a splash of cold water. Your mother told you to meet me? She said you have a right to explain your side, even if... He trailed off, looking away. Even if she disagrees, Calder finished for him. Interesting timing, considering the revelations about Jules. Brennan's shoulders tensed. This isn't about him, isn't it? Calder leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Your mother's affair is public knowledge now. The money she gave him is gone. And suddenly she's encouraging you to talk to me. She feels bad about what happened, Dad. She made a mistake. A mistake, Calder repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. Is that what you call 6 months of lying and cheating? Stealing $200,000 from our accounts. She was unhappy. Brennan's voice rose, drawing glances from passing students. You were never there for her, for either of us. Always working, always at the office. I was building something for our family, Calder replied evenly. Everything I did, every hour I worked, was to give you both security and opportunities. We didn't need more money or bigger houses, Dad. We needed you to be present. And that justifies what she did. Brennan looked away. No, but explains it. Calder studied his son, seeing the conflict in his expression. You're still defending her. She's my mother, and I'm your father. But you didn't hesitate to take her side, did you? To blame me for her actions. I didn't. You did, Brennan. From the moment she confessed, you backed her story that I was somehow responsible for her affair. Brennan's face flushed with anger. What was I supposed to do? You just walked out. You didn't even try to talk about it, to work things out. There was nothing to work out. She betrayed our marriage and stole from our family. She chose Jules over us. And now you're choosing revenge over salvaging what's left of our family. Brennan shot back. Mom at least wants to try to make things right. Calder laughed, a short, harsh sound. Is that what she told you? That she wants to reconcile? To make things right? She's filing charges against Jules. She's admitted she was wrong. Because she has no choice, Calder corrected. Because her lover has been exposed as a fraud who was using her, just like he used all the other women. Her reputation is in tatters. Her social circle has abandoned her. And now she's looking for a safety net. Brennan shook his head in disgust. You're so cold. Do you even care about what this is doing to her? To me, I care very much about what this is doing to you, Calder replied, his voice softening slightly. That's why I'm here, trying to make you understand the reality of the situation. What reality? That you're determined to destroy Mom. That your mother used you, Calder said flatly. She manipulated you to gain control over me. She turned you against me to strengthen her position. That's not true. It is, Brennan. Think about it. Why did she tell you about the affair before confronting me? Why involve you at all in something that should have remained between us? Brennan fell silent, confusion crossing his features. She needed an ally, Calder continued. Someone to back her story that I was the villain, that her actions were justified. And you were the perfect choice, my son, turning against me. She wouldn't do that, Brennan protested, but his voice lacked conviction. If you want to stay loyal to her, that's your choice, Calder said, standing up. But understand, I will never forgive either of you. Not her for her betrayal, and not you for allowing yourself to be used as a weapon against me. Brennan stared up at him, shock written across his face. You can't mean that. I do. Calder's voice was quiet but firm. Actions have consequences, Brennan. Your mother is learning that lesson now. Perhaps it's time you did too. He walked away without looking back, though every step felt like lead. Part of him wanted to turn around, to soften his words, to leave some door open for reconciliation. But that part was overshadowed by the cold certainty that trust, once broken, could never be fully restored. Back in his car, Calder sat motionless, staring at the campus building where his son remained. He had spoken nothing but the truth, harsh as it was. Marla had used Brennan as a pawn in her game, and the boy had allowed it, too eager to believe the worst of his father. His phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Judge denied Marla's motion for temporary spousal support. We're making progress. The news should have brought satisfaction, but Calder felt only a hollow emptiness. He started the engine and pulled away from the curb, leaving behind not just Brennan, but the last threads of the family they had once been. That evening, as Calder worked in his home office, he heard the front door slam. Heavy footsteps stomped up the stairs, followed by Brennan's voice, raised in anger. How could you do that to me? To us? Marla's response was too quiet to make out, but her tone was defensive, pleading. Dad said you used me. Brennan continued, his voice breaking. That you told me about the affair to turn me against him. Is that true? Silence. Then Marla's voice, louder now. Of course not. Your father is trying to manipulate you. Can't you see that? He's trying to drive a wedge between us because he knows we're stronger together. Then why did you tell me before you told him? Why involve me at all? More silence. Then the murmur of voices too low to distinguish. Calder returned to his work, but his concentration was broken. The confrontation upstairs confirmed what he already knew. The cracks in Marla's carefully constructed narrative were beginning to show, and Brennan was finally starting to see the truth. It was nearly midnight when a knock came at his office door. Calder looked up to find Brennan standing in the doorway, his eyes red-rimmed but determined. Can we talk? His son asked quietly. Calder gestured to the chair across from his desk. What about? Brennan sat down, his movements stiff with tension. I talked to Mom about why she told me about the affair before confronting you. And she said she needed moral support, that she was afraid of how you'd react. Calder nodded, waiting. But that doesn't make sense, Brennan continued, his voice growing stronger. She wasn't afraid of you. She was smug about it, almost like she wanted to hurt you. Yes, Calder agreed simply. And when I think about it, she was the one who kept bringing up how distant you were, how you were never there for us. But you were, weren't you? Maybe not always physically, but you provided for us. You made sure we had everything we needed. I tried to, Calder said, careful to keep his tone neutral. I'm not claiming I was a perfect husband or father, Brennan. I worked long hours. I missed things I should have been there for. But I never betrayed your mother's trust. I never stole from our family. Brennan nodded slowly, his expression troubled. I think I've been unfair to you. I let Mom influence how I saw things, and I didn't stop to question why. A part of Calder wanted to embrace his son, to tell him that all was forgiven. But the larger part, the part that had been hardened by weeks of betrayal and manipulation, remained cautious. Why are you telling me this now? He asked. Because I don't want to be caught in the middle anymore, Brennan said honestly. I don't want to be used by either of you. I've never tried to use you, Brennan. No, but you've been pretty harsh with me. Yes, Calder acknowledged. Because I needed you to see the truth, even if it hurt. Brennan was quiet for a moment, thinking, so where does this leave us? That depends on you, Calder replied. I can't pretend the past few weeks haven't happened. You chose to believe the worst of me without giving me a chance to defend myself. That's not something I can easily forget. I'm sorry, Dad. I really am. Calder studied his son, seeing genuine remorse in his expression. But it wasn't enough, not yet. I appreciate that, Brennan. But trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. Brennan nodded, accepting this hard truth. I understand. I don't want to lose you, Dad. You haven't lost me, Calder assured him, his voice softening slightly. But things can't go back to the way they were. We all have to live with the choices we've made. As Brennan left the office, Calder felt the first small crack in the wall of ice he had built around himself. Not enough to forgive, not yet, perhaps not ever, but enough to acknowledge that his son was taking the first steps toward understanding the full weight of what had happened. It was a start, however small. The courthouse buzzed with tension as Calder took his seat beside Michael at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, Marla sat with her attorney, Johnson, a man known for his aggressive tactics and theatrical courtroom presence. This hearing would determine the division of assets and alimony, the culmination of months of legal maneuvering and preparation. Marla looked composed in a conservative navy suit, her hair pulled back in a simple knot. But Calder could see the strain in the tight line of her mouth, the slight tremor in her hands as she arranged papers before her. Judge Eleanor Reeves entered, her stern expression sweeping over the courtroom before she took her seat. We're here today for Matthews versus Matthews, she announced. I've reviewed the filings from both sides. Mr. Johnson, you may present your client's case first. Johnson rose, straightening his silk tie. Thank you, Your Honor. We're seeking equitable distribution of marital assets, including Mr. Matthews' business, which Mrs. Matthews helped build through her extensive networking and client relationships. Additionally, we're requesting alimony that reflects the lifestyle Mrs. Matthews has maintained throughout the marriage. Judge Reeves nodded. And the recent developments regarding Mrs. Matthews' alleged involvement with Mr. Harmon, a regrettable personal matter, Your Honor, but one that has no bearing on the division of assets. Mrs. Matthews' brief indiscretion doesn't negate 17 years of marriage or her contributions to Mr. Matthews' success. I see. Mr. Donovan, your response? Michael stood, his demeanor calm and focused. Your Honor, we contest both the request for a portion of Matthews' construction and the excessive alimony demands. Mrs. Matthews' contributions to the business were minimal and social in nature, not strategic or operational. He placed a folder on the judge's bench. More significantly, we have evidence that Mrs. Matthews systematically withdrew nearly $200,000 from joint accounts over an 8-month period, coinciding with her affair with Mr. Harmon. This money was given to Mr. Harmon for fraudulent investment schemes, effectively stealing from the marital assets. Judge Reeves frowned as she reviewed the documents. These are serious allegations, Mr. Donovan. Yes, Your Honor, and they're fully documented. We have bank records, witness statements, and Mrs. Matthews' own admission to the police in the fraud complaint she filed against Mr. Harmon. Johnson jumped to his feet. Your Honor, my client was a victim of Mr. Harmon's schemes, just like several other women in town. This is a transparent attempt to distract from the real issues of this divorce. The real issue, Michael countered, is that Mrs. Matthews betrayed her husband both emotionally and financially. She cannot now claim entitlement to additional assets after deliberately depleting the marital funds. Judge Reeves held up a hand. I've heard enough opening statements. Let's proceed with testimony. Mr. Matthews, would you take the stand? As Calder was sworn in, he caught Marla's eye. Her expression was a mixture of defiance and apprehension. She knew what was coming. Michael led him through his testimony methodically, establishing the timeline of their marriage, the building of his construction business, and Marla's lifestyle. Mr. Matthews, when did you first become aware of your wife's affair? On March 15th of this year, when she told me directly that she had been sleeping with Jules Harmon for 6 months. And what was your response? I left the house to process the information. I didn't say much at the time. Did Mrs. Matthews ever express remorse for the affair? Not initially. She seemed proud of it, saying she needed a real man. It was only after Mr. Harmon was exposed as a fraud that she began to express regret. Johnson objected repeatedly, but Judge Reeves allowed most of the testimony. When Michael moved on to the financial aspects, he introduced bank records showing systematic withdrawals from their joint accounts. Mr. Matthews, did you authorize these withdrawals? No. I was unaware of them until my lawyer discovered the pattern after I filed for divorce. And do you know what happened to these funds? According to my wife's statement to the police, she gave the money to Jules Harmon for what she believed was an investment in a real estate development in Pine Hollow. A development that doesn't exist, Michael clarified. Correct. When Johnson began his cross-examination, his tone was aggressive, his questions designed to provoke. Mr. Matthews, isn't it true that you regularly worked 60 to 70 hours a week throughout your marriage? During certain periods, yes, while building the business. And isn't it true that you missed numerous family events, birthdays, anniversaries, your son's school functions because of work? I missed some events, yes. Some. Johnson raised an eyebrow theatrically. Your son's high school graduation? Yes. I missed that due to an emergency at a major project site. Your 15th wedding anniversary? Yes, we celebrated the following weekend. Your wife's father's funeral? Calder's jaw tightened slightly. Yes, I was overseas on a business trip and couldn't get back in time. Johnson nodded with satisfaction. So you were, in fact, emotionally absent from the marriage long before Mrs. Matthews sought comfort elsewhere. Objection. Michael interjected. Argumentative. Sustained. Judge Reeves agreed. Mr. Johnson, please stick to questions. Johnson shifted tactics. Mr. Matthews, isn't it true that your wife played a crucial role in helping you secure clients through her social connections? She introduced me to some potential clients at social events, yes, including the Westridge development contract, your company's largest project to date. The introduction came through her, yes, but the contract was secured based on my company's reputation and bid. Yet without that introduction, you wouldn't have been invited to bid, correct? Possibly not at that time, though we would likely have had the opportunity later. The questioning continued for nearly 2 hours, with Johnson trying to establish Marla's contributions to the business and Calder's emotional distance as justification for her actions. But Calder remained composed, answering honestly but not giving Johnson the emotional reaction he clearly hoped for. When Marla took the stand, the contrast was stark. Under Johnson's careful guidance, she portrayed herself as a devoted wife who had supported Calder's ambitions while raising their son largely alone. She admitted to the affair, but characterized it as a desperate search for emotional connection after years of neglect. "I was wrong," she said, her voice catching with what appeared to be genuine remorse. "I made a terrible mistake with Jules. I know that. But it doesn't erase 17 years of marriage or my contributions to our family and Calder's business." When Michael began his cross-examination, his approach was methodical and precise. "Mrs. Matthews, you stated that you felt emotionally neglected in your marriage. Did you ever seek marriage counseling before beginning your affair with Mr. Harmon?" "No, but a simple yes or no will suffice, Mrs. Matthews." "Did you ever clearly communicate to your husband that you were unhappy enough to consider ending the marriage?" "Not in those exact words. In fact, according to your credit card statements, during the period of your affair, you spent over $30,000 on personal items, designer clothing, spa treatments, weekend trips, all paid for by the income from your husband's business. Is that correct?" Yes." Michael then moved to the financial withdrawals, having Marla confirm the amounts and dates. "And what did Mr. Harmon tell you this money was for, specifically?" "A condominium development in Pine Hollow. He said it was a guaranteed return of 20% within 6 months. Did you consult with your husband or a financial advisor before making this investment?" "No." "Why not?" Marla hesitated. I knew Calder wouldn't approve. Because it was a poor investment? Or because it was going to your lover?" "Objection." Johnson called. Withdrawn, Michael said smoothly. "Mrs. Matthews, when did you first suspect that Mr. Harmon might be defrauding you?" "When the story broke in the newspaper about the other women." "Not before?" "Despite the fact that he never provided documentation of the investment or updates on the supposed development." "I trusted him," she said quietly. "You trusted him with $200,000 of marital assets, without any verification or due diligence. Is it your testimony?" By the time Michael finished his cross-examination, Marla's carefully constructed narrative had crumbled. Her tearful remorse seemed calculated, her claims of contributing to Calder's business success exaggerated. After both sides presented their closing arguments, Judge Reeves announced she would issue her ruling the following week. As the courtroom emptied, Calder felt a strange sense of detachment. The details of his private life had been laid bare in this public forum, yet he felt nothing but a quiet determination to see the process through to its conclusion. Outside, reporters clustered on the courthouse steps. Calder declined to comment, walking briskly to his car with Michael at his side. "We presented a strong case," his lawyer assured him. "Reeves is fair but unsentimental. I think she saw through Johnson's theatrics." "What are our chances?" Calder asked as they reached his car. "Good. Very good." Michael smiled slightly. Johnson overplayed his hand with the emotional neglect angle. Without evidence of actual abuse or abandonment, it's just not compelling enough to justify Marla's actions. Calder nodded, feeling the first hint of relief since this process began. And the business? Safe. Her contributions were minimal and indirect. Reeves won't award her any ownership stake. A week later, Calder sat in the same courtroom as Judge Reeves delivered her ruling. Her voice was clear and firm as she outlined her decision. "Regarding the petition for alimony, I am granting Mrs. Matthews temporary support for a period of 2 years to allow her to reestablish herself professionally. The amount is set at $3,000 monthly, significantly less than requested, in light of the unauthorized withdrawals from joint accounts." Marla's face fell, her knuckles white as she gripped the table before her. "As for the division of assets," Judge Reeves continued, "the family home is to be sold, with proceeds divided equally after the $200,000 withdrawn by Mrs. Matthews is deducted from her share. She then addressed the business directly. Matthews Construction remains the sole property of Mr. Matthews. Mrs. Matthews' contributions, while noted, were not substantive enough to warrant partial ownership. Johnson leaned over to whisper urgently to Marla, who shook her head firmly. When the judge had finished outlining the division of remaining assets and retirement accounts, she addressed them directly. This divorce, like many, has been contentious and painful for all involved, but it is now concluded. I expect both parties to abide by the terms set forth today and to move forward with their lives. As the court was dismissed, Calder felt no triumph, no vindication, only a muted sense of closure. He had protected what was his, had refused to be manipulated or bullied into giving Marla more than she deserved. His life would continue, altered but intact. Marla caught his eye as they exited the courtroom, her expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed she might approach him, but Johnson steered her toward a side hallway, already discussing the possibility of an appeal. Calder watched them go, feeling the last thread connecting him to his former life finally sever. There would be practical matters to address: selling the house, dividing personal possessions, but the hard part was over. He had won, not because he was better than Marla, but because he had refused to let her break him. In that refusal, he had found his strength. The summer heat shimmered above the asphalt as Calder pulled into the driveway of his new home, a modern two-bedroom condo overlooking the river. After weeks of showings, the family house had finally sold, bringing that chapter to a definitive close. He was unloading groceries from his car when his phone buzzed with a text from Brennan. "Dad, can we talk? I'm back in town for a few days. Important." Calder stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the screen. It had been weeks since their confrontation at the university, weeks of minimal communication consisting mostly of terse texts about practical matters. After a moment's hesitation, he typed, "I'm at the new place. You can come by at 6. The response was immediate. "Thank you. See you then." The hours until Brennan's arrival passed slowly. Calder busied himself with unpacking the last few boxes in his home office, arranging books and files with methodical precision. The condo was smaller than the house, but suited him perfectly: clean lines, minimal furnishings, no traces of Marla's ornate taste. Precisely 6 p.m., the doorbell rang. Calder opened it to find his son standing uncertainly on the threshold, looking thinner than when he'd last seen him. "Come in," Calder said, stepping aside. Brennan entered, his gaze taking in the space. "Nice place. It works for me." Calder led him to the living room. "Would you like something to drink?" "Water will be great, thanks." When Calder returned with 2 glasses, he found Brennan standing by the window, looking out at the river below. "The view is amazing," his son commented, accepting the water. "It's why I chose it." Calder sat in one of the armchairs, gesturing for Brennan to take the other. "You said you wanted to talk." Brennan nodded, setting his glass on the side table. "I've been doing a lot of thinking over the past few weeks about everything that happened with you and Mom and my role in it." Calder remained silent, waiting. "I've realized that I was unfair to you," Brennan continued, his voice growing steadier. "I took Mom's side without question because it was easier than facing the truth. I let her use me against you, exactly like you said." "What changed your mind?" Calder asked, his tone neutral. "A lot of things." Brennan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like Calder's own that it caused a momentary pang. "The evidence from the court case, for one. I read the transcripts, all of them. The financial records were pretty clear. They were. And," Brennan hesitated, "I've been talking to Mom more. Really talking, not just letting her tell me her version of events. The more we talked, the more inconsistencies I noticed. Little things at first, then bigger ones." He leaned forward, eyes meeting Calder's directly. "Last week, she admitted that she told me about the affair specifically to get me on her side. She thought if I blamed you too, you'd be more likely to give in to her demands in the divorce." Calder absorbed this without visible reaction, though something cold settled in his stomach. "I see. I'm sorry, Dad," Brennan said, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm sorry I didn't trust you. I'm sorry I let myself be manipulated. And I'm sorry I turned on you when you needed support." The apology hung in the air between them, sincere and raw. Part of Calder wanted to accept it immediately to bridge the gap that had grown between them. But the larger part, the part that had been hardened by betrayal, remained cautious. I appreciate you saying that, Brennan. I really do, but it's not enough, his son finished for him, a sad understanding in his eyes. It's not that simple, Calder clarified. Trust isn't rebuilt with a single conversation. I know. I'm not expecting you to forgive me right away. Brennan swallowed hard. I don't want to lose you, Dad. I don't want what Mom did to destroy our relationship, too. Calder studied his son, seeing genuine remorse in his expression. But it wasn't enough, not yet. You made your choice, Brennan. I can't forgive you for what you did, and I won't accept you back into my life as if nothing happened. You have to learn from this, even if it's too late for us. The words were harsh, but Calder delivered them without anger, simply stating what he believed to be true. Brennan flinched but nodded slowly. I understand, but I'm not giving up. I'll prove that I've changed, that I can be trusted again. That's your choice to make. They sat in silence for a moment before Brennan spoke again. How have you been? With the new place, the business? Good, Calder replied, allowing the conversation to shift to safer ground. The Westridge project is ahead of schedule. We're starting the Jensen development next month. That's great. And personally, Calder raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Are you? Brennan hesitated. Are you seeing anyone? The question was unexpected. No, I'm not interested in that right now. Mom thinks you're involved with your friend Annalise. She's convinced you were having an affair with her before the divorce. A short, humorless laugh escaped Calder. Of course she does. It's easier for her to believe I was cheating too than to accept full responsibility for her actions. Were you? With Annalise, I mean. No, Calder said firmly. Annalise is a friend and business associate. Nothing more. Brennan nodded, accepting this. I figured. But Mom, he shrugged. She sees what she wants to see. How is she? Calder asked, surprising himself with the question. Struggling, Brennan admitted. The alimony helps, but she's having a hard time finding work. Her reputation in town is pretty much destroyed. That's unfortunate, but it's the consequence of her choices. I know. Brennan picked up his water glass, turning it in his hands. She's talking about moving to Portland, starting fresh where people don't know her. Calder nodded, but offered no comment. Marla's future plans were no longer his concern. They talked for another hour, carefully navigating around the most painful subjects. It wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile, either a tentative first step toward something new. As Brennan prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Can I call you sometime? Maybe we could get lunch? Calder considered this, weighing his lingering hurt against the possibility of rebuilding some form of relationship with his son. You can call, he said finally. I can't promise more than that right now. I understand. Thank you, Dad. Brennan hesitated, then added, I won't let you down again. I promise. After his son left, Calder stood at the window, watching as Brennan's car pulled away from the curb. The evening light cast long shadows across the river below. The water's surface rippled with golden reflections that he felt no rush of forgiveness, no sudden healing of the breach between them. But there was something a small crack in the wall of ice he had built around himself. Not enough to forgive, not yet, perhaps not ever, but enough to acknowledge that his son was taking steps toward understanding the full weight of what had happened. It was a start, however small. The for sale sign on Marla's rented apartment had been up for 3 weeks, a visual reminder of her impending departure from Millbridge. Calder noticed it as he drove past on his way to a meeting with a potential client. They hadn't spoken directly to Marla since the final divorce hearing 4 months ago. Their communication had been handled through lawyers or, occasionally, through Brennan when absolutely necessary. But her presence in town remained a peripheral awareness, like a scar that had healed but still twinged in cold weather. T. Carson's Hardware. Picking up supplies for a minor repair at his condo, Calder overheard 2 women talking in the next aisle. Did you hear Marla Matthews is finally leaving town? About time. The nerve of that woman, showing her face at the community fundraiser last month. I heard she couldn't find a single employer willing to hire her. Not after the Jules Harmon scandal. Can you blame them? Who wants someone with such poor judgment representing their business? Their voices faded as they moved away, but their words lingered. Calder felt no satisfaction in Marla's continued social exile, only a detached acknowledgement of the natural consequences of her actions. Later that week, as he grabbed coffee at his usual spot downtown, he spotted Marla through the window of a small boutique across the street. She was alone, examining a display with a distracted air. Even from a distance, he could see the changes in her: the weight loss, the simplified hairstyle, the absence of the designer clothes she had once favored. She looked up suddenly, as if sensing his gaze, but Calder had already turned away, continuing his walk to the office. There was nothing left to say between them. That evening, as he worked late in his office, his assistant, Ryan, knocked on the door. "Mr. Matthews, there's someone here to see you." Calder glanced at his watch, nearly 8 p.m. "Who is it?" "Diane Porter." The name was unexpected. Diane was one of the other women Jules had defrauded, Councilman Porter's now ex-wife. Calder had met her briefly during the investigation into Jules's schemes, but had no personal connection to her. "Send her in," he said, curious. Diane entered hesitantly, elegant in a simple black dress, her expression uncertain. "I'm sorry to disturb you so late, Mr. Matthews. I can come back tomorrow if this is inconvenient." "It's fine," Calder assured her, gesturing to a chair. "What can I do for you?" She sat, smoothing her skirt nervously. "This is somewhat awkward, but I wanted to speak with you about Marla." Calder's expression remained neutral. "What about her? I know you have no reason to care about her welfare," Diane began. "And after everything that happened, I wouldn't blame you for washing your hands of the whole situation. But I'm concerned about her." "In what way?" "She's not doing well." Diane twisted her hands in her lap. "The money from the divorce is nearly gone: legal fees, rent, basic living expenses. She can't find work here, and she's too proud to ask her family for help." "I'm sorry to hear that," Calder said, meaning it. Despite everything, he took no pleasure in Marla's suffering. "But I'm not sure what this has to do with me." "Nothing really." Diane smiled sadly. "I just thought you should know. We, the other women involved with Jules, we've formed a sort of support group. Everyone's moving forward except Marla. She seems stuck." "Stuck how?" "She can't let go of the past, a view of the life she had. She talks about you constantly, alternating between blaming you for everything and expressing regret for what she did." Calder absorbed this, his expression unchanged. "Again, I'm sympathetic, but I don't see how I can help." "I'm not asking you to help her," Diane clarified. "I just thought, well, closure might be beneficial. For both of you." "We had closure," Calder said firmly. "In court, with a signed divorce decree. Legal closure, yes. But emotionally," she trailed off, then shook her head. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come. This isn't your problem anymore." As she stood to leave, Calder asked, "Why are you concerned about Marla's welfare? After what Jules did to all of you, I'd have thought you'd be the last person to care." Diane paused, considering the question. "We were all victims of the same man, Mr. Matthews. Different circumstances, perhaps, but the same betrayal. There's a strange bond in that shared experience." After she left, Calder remained at his desk, thinking. Diane's visit had stirred memories he preferred to keep buried, not of the good times with Marla, but of the moment everything changed. The casual cruelty of her confession, the smug satisfaction in her eyes, as she'd said, "I needed a real man." He felt no desire to see Marla again, no need for the emotional closure Diane had suggested. Whatever lingering connection they had was severed the moment Marla had chosen Jules over their marriage. The next morning, as Calder walked to a breakfast meeting at a cafe downtown, he spotted Marla coming out of the post office. She saw him too, her step faltering momentarily before she straightened her shoulders and continued walking, her eyes fixed ahead. They passed each other without acknowledgement, like strangers sharing a sidewalk. Later that week, Brennan called during his lunch break. Their conversations had become more regular over the past months, not comfortable yet, but less strained. "Dad, I wanted to let you know that I'm helping Mom move to Portland next weekend. She got a job with a small real estate firm there." "That's good news," Calder replied honestly. "A fresh start might be what she needs." "Yeah, I think so too." Brennan hesitated. "She asked if you'd meet with her before she goes." "For closure." Calder's mouth tightened. That's unnecessary. That's what I told her, but she insisted I ask. A pause. She seems different lately. More. I don't know. Accepting of what happened. She stopped blaming you for everything. I'm glad to hear that, Calder said, and found that he meant it. It's an important step for moving forward. But that doesn't mean we need to meet. I understand. Brennan's disappointment was evident, but not pushy. I'll tell her. After hanging up, Calder turned back to his work, but found his concentration broken. The idea of Marla leaving Millbridge stirred no emotion in him, not relief, not satisfaction, certainly not regret. It was simply a fact, like the weather forecast or a business transaction. That evening, he met Annalise Hamilton for dinner at a new restaurant outside town. Their friendship had deepened in the months since his divorce, though it remained strictly platonic despite the rumors Marla had apparently been spreading. Annalise, a successful interior designer who often collaborated with Matthews Construction on high-end projects, was one of the few people who had offered unconditional support throughout the divorce. She had never pressed for details, never judged, simply been there when he needed a friend. You seem distracted, she observed as they waited for their entrees. Trouble with the Jensen project? No, that's on track. Calder swirled his wine thoughtfully. I heard today that Marla is moving to Portland. Ah, Annalise nodded, understanding. How do you feel about that? I don't, he admitted. That's what's strange. I thought I'd feel something relief, closure, something, but there's nothing. Maybe that is closure, she suggested. When someone no longer has the power to affect your emotions, either positively or negatively. Maybe. He set his glass down. She wanted to meet before she left. For closure, apparently. And you declined. Yes. There's nothing left to say. Annalise studied him for a moment. You know, sometimes closure isn't about what's said, but about seeing with clear eyes what is and what isn't anymore. Meaning that perhaps seeing Marla one last time would confirm what you already know, that the person you married no longer exists for you. That the connection is truly severed. Calder considered this. You think I should meet with her? I think you should do whatever brings you peace, Annalise corrected. If that's never seeing her again, so be it. But if there's any part of you that wonders, their dinner arrived, temporarily pausing the conversation. As they ate, Calder found himself contemplating Annalise's words. Was there any part of him that wondered? That needed confirmation that the severing was complete? He didn't think so. But the very fact that he was still thinking about it suggested otherwise. 2 days later, against his better judgment, Calder called Brennan. Tell your mother I'll meet her for coffee tomorrow at 2. At Morgan's, downtown. 15 minutes, no more. Really? Brennan sounded surprised. I'll tell her. Thanks, Dad. Don't thank me yet. I'm not promising anything besides showing up. Morgan's Cafe was quiet at 2 p.m., the lunch crowd gone and the afternoon regulars not yet arrived. Calder chose a table near the window, ordered black coffee, and waited, part of him still questioning the wisdom of this meeting. Marla arrived precisely on time, wearing a simple blue dress he had never seen before. She looked thinner, older, the confident glow that had once been her hallmark dimmed to a more subdued presence. Thank you for agreeing to meet, she said as she took the seat across from him. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't either, Calder replied honestly. A server approached, and Marla ordered tea. When they were alone again, she spoke carefully, as if each word had been rehearsed. I wanted to see you before I left town, to apologize face to face for everything. Calder remained silent, neither accepting nor rejecting her apology. What I did was inexcusable, she continued. The affair, the lies, using Brennan against you. I've had a lot of time to think about why I did it, and I realize now that I was deeply unhappy, not because of anything you did or didn't do, but because of my own issues. Her fingers twisted nervously around her cup as she spoke. I blamed you because it was easier than taking responsibility. I told myself you were distant, unavailable, that you drove me to Jules. But the truth is I was selfish and looking for validation outside our marriage instead of working on the problems within it. The server returned with Marla's tea, interrupting momentarily. When she had gone, Calder finally spoke. Why are you telling me this now? Because I need to say it. Because I need to take responsibility before I leave and try to start over. Marla's eyes met his directly. And because you deserve to hear it, even if it changes nothing between us. Calder nodded slightly, acknowledging the sentiment, if not forgiving the actions. I appreciate the apology. I hope Portland is a fresh start for you. It has to be, she said with a small, sad smile. There's nothing left for me here except memories and regrets. They sat in silence for a moment, the space between them filled with the echoes of a shared past that could never be reclaimed. Are you happy, Calder? Marla asked suddenly. With your life now? The question caught him off guard, but he answered truthfully. I'm at peace. That's enough. And Annalise? Are you two? Friends, he said firmly. Nothing more. Marla nodded, accepting this. I spread those rumors about you two having an affair. I was angry and wanted to hurt you. I'm sorry for that too. It doesn't matter now. She glanced at her watch, aware that their agreed-upon 15 minutes were nearly up. I should go. Thank you for meeting me. As she stood to leave, Calder found himself asking, why did you tell Brennan about the affair before confronting me? The real reason. Marla hesitated, then answered with unexpected honesty. I knew he would take my side. I knew it would hurt you more than the affair itself, your son turning against you. I wanted to hurt you, Calder. I wanted you to feel as insignificant as I sometimes felt. The blunt admission hung in the air between them. Thank you for your honesty, Calder said finally. Goodbye, Marla. I wish you well in Portland. Goodbye, Calder. As she walked away, Calder felt neither closure nor regret, only a quiet certainty that this chapter of his life was truly ending. Not with dramatic flair, but with the simple acknowledgement of what was and what could never be again. The annual Millbridge Business Association Gala filled the grand ballroom of the Westin Hotel with the town's most prominent citizens. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over elegantly dressed attendees, their conversations creating a gentle hum that rose and fell like waves. Calder adjusted his tie as he stepped through the entrance, Annalise at his side in a simple yet striking emerald dress. 6 months had passed since Marla's departure for Portland. 6 months of steady rebuilding of his business, his relationship with Brennan, his life. Nervous? Annalise asked with a knowing smile. No, Calder replied truthfully. Just another business function. But they both knew it was more than that. This was his first major social appearance since the divorce. The first time he would face the collective gaze of Millbridge society, not as one half of the Matthews power couple, but as himself alone. Well, not entirely alone. Annalise's presence beside him was a comfort, though their relationship remained steadfastly platonic despite the persistent rumors. She understood him in a way few others did: his drive, his reserved nature, his unwillingness to compromise on matters of principle. They moved through the crowd, accepting drinks from a passing server. Calder nodded to acquaintances, shook hands with business associates, engaged in the expected small talk. If people were watching him with curious eyes, speculating about his divorce or his friendship with Annalise, he gave no indication of noticing or caring. Calder. Michael Donovan approached, hand extended. Good to see you here. And Miss Hamilton, you look lovely as always. Thank you. Michael. Annalise replied with a warm smile. How's Angela? Thriving. She's over by the dessert table, probably plotting how to sneak an extra slice of cheesecake past me. He turned to Calder. The Westridge project looks magnificent. You must be pleased with the results. Very, Calder agreed. Your brother's law firm seems happy with their new offices in the East Wing. Delighted. He says the views alone were worth the premium. As they discussed the project's final details, Calder's gaze drifted over Michael's shoulder, scanning the room out of habit. And then he saw them, Brennan and, unexpectedly, Marla, seated at a table near the back of the ballroom. His son had mentioned coming to the gala as part of his internship with a local engineering firm, but had said nothing about his mother accompanying him. Marla wasn't supposed to be in Millbridge at all, as far as Calder knew. Calder. Annalise's gentle touch on his arm brought him back to the conversation. Michael was asking about the Jensen development. Sorry, he said, focusing on his lawyer again. The groundbreaking is next month. We're just waiting on the final permits. The conversation continued, but part of Calder's attention remained fixed on the fact of Marla's presence. She looked different, her hair shorter, her dress more subdued than the flashy style she had once favored. She was speaking with an older couple Calder didn't recognize, her gestures animated but controlled. Brennan caught his eye across the room and offered a tentative wave. Their relationship had improved over the past months, not restored to what it once was, perhaps never would be, but healing gradually through regular calls and occasional dinners. Calder excused himself from Michael and Annalise, making his way across the room to his son. As he approached, Brennan stood, his expression a mixture of nervousness and hope. "Dad, hi. I didn't know if you'd be here tonight." "It's good to see you," Calder said, and meant it. "I didn't realize your mother would be attending." Brennan shifted uncomfortably. "She's back in town just for the weekend. Uncle Robert's birthday." He referred to Marla's brother, who still lived in Millbridge. "She wanted to come tonight to support me. I hope that's okay." "It's fine," Calder assured him. "This is a public event." Marla returned to the table then, stopping short when she saw Calder. "Hello, Calder," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Marla." He nodded politely. "I understand you're here for Robert's birthday." "Yes, just for the weekend." She glanced at Brennan, then back to Calder. "Brennan mentioned this gala, and I thought it would be nice to see him in his professional element." There was an awkward pause, the three of them standing in a strange triangle of shared history and separate futures. "How's Portland?" Calder asked finally, making the minimal effort at civility. "Good. Different. The real estate market is more competitive, but I'm establishing myself." She attempted a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How's business?" "Strong. The Westridge project is complete, and we're breaking ground on the Jensen development next month." "I saw the Westridge building yesterday. It's impressive, Calder." "Thank you." Another pause, longer and more strained. Brennan looked between his parents, clearly searching for some way to ease the tension. "Dad, maybe you could join us for a few minutes?" he suggested. Mom was just telling the Hendersons about her new condo in Portland. It was a well-intentioned offer, but Calder shook his head. "I should get back to Annalise." We were in the middle of a conversation with Michael. At the mention of Annalise, something flickered in Marla's eyes, not jealousy exactly, but perhaps a recognition of what she had lost, of the life that had continued without her. "Of course," she said, her composure intact. "It was good to see you, Calder." "You too." He turned to Brennan. "Call me tomorrow? We could have lunch before you head back to school." "I'd like that," his son agreed, relief evident in his expression. As Calder walked away, he felt Marla's gaze following him, seeking some sign of emotion, of lingering connection. But there was nothing there, no anger, no resentment, not even indifference. Just the quiet acknowledgement of a chapter closed. He rejoined Annalise, who was now chatting with the mayor and his wife. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly when the mayor moved on to greet other guests. "Yes," Calder said, and realized it was true. Seeing Marla had stirred no strong emotions, no reopening of old wounds. She was simply someone he used to know, a figure from a past that no longer defined him. The evening continued, a blend of networking and socializing that once would have exhausted Calder, but now felt strangely comfortable. He found himself engaged in genuine conversations, laughing at Annalise's witty observations, discussing future projects with potential clients. At one point, he caught sight of Marla watching him from across the room. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment of connection, Calder felt nothing but a detached acknowledgement. No triumph, no bitterness, just the recognition that he had moved on, that the hold she once had over him was gone. Later, as the gala wound down and guests began to depart, Brennan approached him again, this time alone. "Mom's leaving," he explained. "Uncle Robert is picking her up. I just wanted to confirm lunch tomorrow." "Noon at Carson's," Calder suggested, naming a restaurant they both enjoyed. "Perfect." Brennan hesitated, then added, "Thanks, Dad, for being civil tonight. I know it couldn't have been easy seeing Mom unexpectedly." "It was fine," Calder assured him. And strangely, it had been. The anticipated awkwardness, the resurfacing of old hurt, none of it had materialized. Instead, he had felt only a calm certainty that he had made the right choices, that his life now was of his own making, As Brennan left to rejoin his mother, Annalise appeared at Calder's side. Ready to go? I think we fulfilled our social obligations for the evening. More than, Calder agreed with a small smile. Let's get out of here. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing after the warmth of the ballroom. The valet brought Calder's car around, and as they waited, Annalise studied him thoughtfully. You seem different tonight, she observed. More at ease, somehow. Calder considered this. I feel different. Seeing Marla, talking to her, confirmed something I think I already knew. What's that? That I've truly moved on. That what happened doesn't define me anymore. Annalise nodded, understanding. That's a victory, Calder. Not over Marla, but over the past itself. A quiet victory, he agreed. Opening the car door for her, yes, they drove away from the hotel. Calder felt a sense of peace settle over him. Not happiness, exactly, that seemed too simple a word for the complex blend of acceptance and resolve he felt. But contentment, perhaps. The knowledge that he had survived betrayal without allowing it to break him or turn him bitter. He hadn't forgiven Marla or Brennan for their parts in what happened, perhaps he never would. But he had freed himself from the grip of that betrayal, had rebuilt his life on his own terms. And in that rebuilding, in that refusal to be defined by another's actions, he had found a strength he hadn't known he possessed. It wasn't the dramatic triumph he might once have imagined, with Marla humbled and himself vindicated in some public way. It was quieter than that.